We all think we know who we are, but what if everything you think you know about yourself is just the surface? Beneath that surface lies a darker, hidden force that shapes who you are, your actions, and how you interact with the world. This force is the shadow, a concept introduced by the renowned psychologist Carl Jung. It is the unconscious, often repressed aspect of ourselves that we choose not to acknowledge. The shadow is not a part of us that is inherently evil or bad. It simply consists of everything we hide, whether from others or even from ourselves. The shadow is filled with our suppressed desires, our repressed fears, and those parts of our psyche that society deems unacceptable. Yet this hidden aspect of our being doesn't just sit quietly in the depths of our mind. It often reveals itself in the most unexpected ways, through impulsive actions, intense emotional outbursts, or subconscious projections onto others. This hidden part of our psyche can sometimes erupt, shaping our relationships, decisions, and even how we view the world. But because we refuse to confront it, we remain blind to its influence. Consider a moment in history where societal repression and the denial of the shadow created a collective catastrophe. The rise of totalitarian regimes in the 20th century, fueled by fear, hatred, and collective denial, is a prime example of the shadow's power on a societal level. This global example reveals how the shadow, when not acknowledged, can grow unchecked and lead to destructive outcomes. It's not just the individual who must confront their shadow, it's also society. Understanding the shadow is not just an intellectual pursuit, it's an existential necessity. To truly know yourself and gain mastery over your mind, you must first face the darkness within. Only by confronting and integrating the shadow can you begin to unlock your full potential, transform your behavior, and ultimately break free from the unconscious patterns that control your life. In the coming journey, we will explore how this powerful hidden part of the psyche affects us all, personally and collectively, and why facing the shadow is the key to understanding the self, the world, and the mysteries of the human condition. The origins of the shadow concept. In this section, we dive into the psychological origins of Carl Jung's groundbreaking concept of the shadow, a term he used to describe the parts of ourselves that are hidden from our conscious awareness. These are the aspects of our personality that we either reject, suppress, or are unaware of, but they often manifest in our thoughts, behaviors, and emotions in subtle ways. To understand the shadow, we must first explore the conditions under which Jung developed this idea. Jung's journey into the depths of the unconscious began in the early 20th century when psychology was still dominated by the Freudian perspective. Freud's focus on the conscious mind, repression, and childhood experiences was revolutionary, but Jung felt there was something more, something that went beyond Freud's emphasis on sexual and repressed urges. Jung was particularly interested in the collective unconscious, a shared reservoir of human experience, archetypes, and myths. But it wasn't until he began to explore his own inner world, his dreams, visions, and encounters with his own darker impulses, that he fully grasped the power of the shadow. Jung's personal crisis, which included a period of deep isolation and introspection, was a key moment in his understanding of the shadow. During this time, he confronted his own hidden fears, desires, and impulses, things that he had long repressed. In his Red Book, Jung described his inner journey in vivid detail, recording the images and symbols that arose from his unconscious mind. These encounters with the shadow were profound and transformative, shaping his later work on the unconscious. But Jung didn't just develop the shadow concept through personal experience. He was also influenced by a wide array of sources, both scientific and philosophical. Ancient mythology, religious traditions, and even alchemical texts provided a rich tapestry of symbols that informed his ideas. In particular, Jung was fascinated by the dualities present in many cultural myths: light and dark, good and evil, conscious and unconscious. The shadow, in Jung's eyes, was an integral part of these dualities, representing the unacknowledged, repressed, or rejected aspects of the self. Jung's insight was that the shadow is not inherently evil or dangerous. Instead, it represents the parts of ourselves that, when unacknowledged, can lead to dysfunction, projection, and internal conflict. Integrating the shadow, bringing these hidden aspects into conscious awareness, is a critical step in achieving personal growth, wholeness, and psychological balance. By recognizing and confronting the shadow, individuals can free themselves from the unconscious patterns that govern their behavior, leading to a more authentic and fulfilling life. In this section, we see how Jung's deep exploration of his own unconscious mind and his synthesis of psychological, mythological, and philosophical traditions led him to one of his most significant contributions to psychology: the shadow. It is not merely a dark, threatening force within us, but a complex, essential part of our human nature that requires acknowledgement, integration, and understanding. The shadow in everyday life. In this section, we take a closer look at how the shadow manifests in our daily lives, often in ways we are unaware of, yet profoundly influential in shaping our behavior, emotions, and interactions. The shadow is not an abstract concept reserved for the realm of psychoanalysis or philosophy. It is alive and active in every moment of our existence, influencing the way we respond to the world and the people around us. One of the most common ways the shadow reveals itself is through projection. Projection occurs when we attribute our own hidden or suppressed feelings, traits, or desires onto others. For example, a person who harbors unresolved anger may perceive everyone around them as being hostile or aggressive, even when there is no clear evidence to support this. The shadow is responsible for these projections, as it houses the emotions or traits we refuse to acknowledge within ourselves. By projecting these qualities onto others, we avoid confronting our own vulnerabilities or flaws. The shadow also plays a key role in shaping our relationships. Often, we find ourselves drawn to or repelled by certain individuals, and these reactions may have less to do with the other person and more to do with what they represent within our own psyche. For instance, someone who represses feelings of inadequacy may be triggered by someone who embodies confidence or success, leading to feelings of jealousy or resentment. In these moments, the shadow is at work, causing us to react emotionally to aspects of ourselves that we refuse to confront. Another powerful manifestation of the shadow in everyday life is in our coping mechanisms and defense strategies. When we encounter situations that trigger discomfort, anxiety, or fear, our shadow often leads us to adopt defense mechanisms such as denial, repression, or rationalization. We may deny our feelings of insecurity or inadequacy, brushing them aside in favor of a more acceptable image of ourselves. But in doing so, we fail to address the root cause of these emotions, keeping the shadow in control and preventing us from engaging in personal growth. At a societal level, the shadow influences not just individuals, but entire cultures. Collective projections of the shadow can be seen in the way groups of people scapegoat others, demonize certain behaviors, or repress certain ideas. Historical examples are plentiful. Wars, political movements, and social divides often arise when societies fail to acknowledge and integrate their collective shadows, projecting their fears and insecurities onto external groups. Whether it's the suppression of minority groups, the denial of environmental destruction, or the scapegoating of political adversaries, the shadow plays a major role in shaping collective actions and attitudes. In everyday life, the shadow is not something we can easily avoid or deny. It is embedded in our unconscious minds, influencing our decisions, behaviors, and interactions with others. Understanding and integrating the shadow requires self-awareness, honesty, and a willingness to confront the parts of ourselves that we have long buried. Only by doing so can we begin to break free from the unconscious patterns that dictate much of our lives and start living with greater authenticity and emotional freedom. In this section, we've seen how the shadow operates on both an individual and collective level. Through projection, defense mechanisms, and our relational dynamics, the shadow shapes the way we see ourselves and others. Recognizing the power of the shadow in everyday life is the first step toward understanding its influence and beginning the journey of integration and self-mastery. Psychological and philosophical insights. The power of the unconscious. In this section, we explore the profound psychological and philosophical implications of Carl Jung's concept of the shadow, focusing on the role of the unconscious mind in shaping human behavior and experience. To fully appreciate the shadow, we must first understand the broader framework of the unconscious that Jung posited, a vast, powerful, and often mysterious aspect of our psyche that influences everything from our decisions to our emotional responses. Jung's notion of the unconscious was revolutionary in its time. Unlike Sigmund Freud, who emphasized the repressed content of the unconscious, primarily rooted in early childhood experiences, Jung expanded the concept to include not only repressed memories and desires, but also the collective unconscious, the inherited, universal symbols and archetypes shared by all humans. The unconscious, according to Jung, is not merely a repository of repressed thoughts, but an active force that shapes our perceptions, actions, and reactions in ways we cannot always control or understand. The shadow is one of the most significant products of the unconscious mind. It consists of all the aspects of ourselves that we repress, deny, or fail to recognize. Traits, desires, and emotions that are deemed unacceptable by our conscious ego. These aspects are often buried because they conflict with the persona we project to the world or the roles we play in society. Yet the shadow is not inherently negative or destructive. Rather, it is an integral part of the whole self, representing the unconscious forces that, when integrated, can bring greater authenticity, wholeness, and emotional health. The shadow is also a deeply philosophical concept, challenging the conventional dualities of good versus evil, light versus dark. Jung argued that the path to psychological wholeness required integrating both the light and dark aspects of the self, recognizing that we are neither purely good nor purely evil, but a complex amalgamation of both. By confronting the shadow, we acknowledge the full range of our human nature, including the aspects we often deem as undesirable or unworthy. This process of integration, called individuation, is central to Jung's understanding of personal growth and self-actualization. From a psychological perspective, the power of the unconscious lies in its ability to influence our lives in ways that often defy our conscious awareness. For example, the shadow can manifest in dreams, fantasies, or unexplained emotional reactions. When we fail to recognize the unconscious forces at play, we may act out these repressed feelings through projection or defense mechanisms, resulting in distorted perceptions of reality. In relationships, we may project our shadow onto others, perceiving traits we deny in ourselves and the people around us. This creates conflict, misunderstanding, and emotional turmoil, preventing us from truly knowing ourselves and others. Philosophically, Jung's concept of the unconscious challenges the Enlightenment ideal of rationality and the dominance of conscious thought. The unconscious, in Jung's view, is not a passive reservoir of forgotten memories, but a dynamic, creative force that continually shapes our lives. The shadow, as a part of the unconscious, holds the key to unlocking a deeper understanding of ourselves and the world. It reveals that the mind is not a simple, rational tool, but a complex interplay of known and unknown forces, many of which are beyond our conscious grasp. Jung's ideas also find resonance in other philosophical traditions. Eastern philosophies, such as Taoism and Buddhism, emphasize the balance of opposites, light and dark, good and evil, as essential to achieving inner peace and harmony. Similarly, the shadow reflects this duality, representing the tension between the conscious and unconscious aspects of the psyche. The more we deny our shadow, the more it exerts its influence over our lives, often causing us to act in ways that are out of alignment with our true nature. The integration of the shadow is not merely a psychological exercise, it is a philosophical and existential journey towards self-knowledge and authenticity. By acknowledging and embracing our shadow aspects, we free ourselves from the unconscious patterns that hold us back and open ourselves to a fuller, more meaningful existence. In this section, we have explored how the unconscious mind, through its shadow, shapes our thoughts, actions, and relationships. Jung's insights challenge us to reconsider the nature of self and reality, urging us to embrace the hidden aspects of ourselves and the unconscious forces that guide us. By doing so, we can move toward a more integrated, authentic existence, where the full range of our humanity is recognized and embraced. Confronting the shadow. Techniques for transformation. Confronting the shadow is not a task for the faint of heart. It requires courage, self-awareness, and a willingness to face the parts of ourselves that we have long repressed or denied. Jung believed that the only way to achieve true personal growth and psychological wholeness was to confront and integrate the shadow. However, the process of shadow work, the psychological work required to bring these hidden aspects into conscious awareness, is challenging, intense, and transformative. In this section, we will explore several key techniques for confronting the shadow and fostering personal transformation. The first technique in confronting the shadow is self-reflection. Taking time to examine our own thoughts, behaviors, and emotions allows us to become more aware of the aspects of ourselves we typically avoid. Self-reflection can take many forms: journaling, meditation, or simply sitting in silence and observing our internal world. Through this process, we begin to notice patterns in our reactions, such as recurring emotional triggers or unconscious biases that point to our hidden fears, desires, or unresolved conflicts. For example, if we consistently feel anger or jealousy toward others, it may be an indication that we are projecting parts of our own shadow onto them. Dream analysis is another powerful technique for confronting the shadow. Jung believed that dreams were a direct link to the unconscious mind, often revealing hidden aspects of ourselves that we are unaware of. In particular, dreams often contain symbols or figures that represent elements of the shadow. By paying attention to the recurring themes, images, and characters in our dreams, we can gain valuable insights into the aspects of ourselves that we need to confront. For example, a dream involving a threatening figure or an animal may represent the shadow qualities of aggression or fear that we have suppressed. Active imagination is another technique developed by Jung to engage with the shadow. Active imagination involves entering a state of deep relaxation or meditation and allowing the unconscious mind to express itself through images, symbols, or even dialogues. By interacting with these images or figures, we can gain a deeper understanding of the parts of ourselves that we have ignored or rejected. This technique can be particularly useful for integrating the shadow because it allows us to actively engage with it in a creative, non-judgmental way. For example, if we encounter a figure in our imagination that embodies a repressed aspect of ourselves, such as a fierce or vengeful side, we can engage in a dialogue with that figure, exploring its motivations and fears, and allowing it to express its deeper truths. Therapy and counseling are also vital tools in confronting the shadow. A trained therapist can help guide us through the process of self-discovery, offering support and insight as we explore the parts of ourselves that we have been avoiding. Therapy provides a safe space for confronting difficult emotions and past experiences that may be connected to the shadow. A therapist can also help us identify the defense mechanisms we use to protect ourselves from the painful aspects of the shadow, such as repression, denial, or projection, and teach us healthier ways to cope with these feelings. Another important technique for confronting the shadow is acceptance. Often, the hardest part of shadow work is accepting the parts of ourselves that we deem negative or unworthy. However, Jung believed that the shadow is not inherently evil. Rather, it contains the full range of human experiences, including those that may seem uncomfortable or unpleasant. By embracing the shadow with compassion and understanding, we can begin to integrate these hidden parts of ourselves into our conscious identity. This acceptance is not about condoning negative behaviors or allowing harmful impulses to control us, but about recognizing that we are complex beings with both light and dark aspects. Shadow work in relationships can also be a powerful tool for transformation. Our relationships often serve as mirrors for our unconscious mind, reflecting back to us the parts of ourselves we may be unwilling to see. By observing how we interact with others, whether in moments of conflict, jealousy, or admiration, we can gain insights into our shadow and learn to respond more consciously. For example, if we find ourselves projecting anger or insecurity onto others, we can ask ourselves why we are reacting in this way and what aspects of our shadow we are avoiding. This awareness can lead to more authentic, compassionate interactions with others. Finally, mindfulness and self-compassion are key components of shadow work. It is easy to become overwhelmed or discouraged when confronting difficult emotions and hidden aspects of ourselves. Practicing mindfulness allows us to observe these feelings without judgment, creating space for acceptance and healing. Self-compassion helps us be gentle with ourselves during this process, recognizing that integrating the shadow is a journey that requires patience, understanding, and care. In this section, we have explored several techniques for confronting the shadow and beginning the process of transformation. Whether through self-reflection, dream analysis, active imagination, therapy, or acceptance, shadow work is an essential step toward personal growth and wholeness. By confronting the hidden aspects of ourselves, we not only gain greater self-awareness, but also open the door to a deeper, more authentic way of living. The shadow may be difficult to face, but in doing so, we unlock the power to heal, transform, and become whole. The shadow and modern society. How it manifests in the collective. The concept of the shadow extends far beyond the individual. It also has a profound impact on modern society as a whole. Just as individuals have repressed, unconscious aspects of themselves, entire cultures and nations carry a collective shadow, a hidden side of the psyche that is often denied or ignored. These societal shadows manifest in various ways, shaping the dynamics of power, conflict, and social order. In this section, we explore how the shadow operates on a collective level, influencing everything from political ideologies to social movements and even global conflicts. On a collective scale, the shadow is not only a reflection of what societies deny within themselves, but also of the parts they refuse to see in others. Jung observed that the more a culture represses certain aspects of its identity, be it through cultural norms, ideologies, or historical narratives, the more likely these hidden traits will be projected onto others. For example, a society that represses its darker impulses, such as aggression or greed, may project these qualities onto an external enemy or marginalized group, viewing them as the source of all evil. This projection often leads to scapegoating, discrimination, and violent conflict. By refusing to acknowledge its own shadow, a society creates a distorted worldview, which can perpetuate injustice and conflict. One of the most powerful ways the shadow manifests in modern society is through political polarization. In recent years, political ideologies have become increasingly divided, with each side accusing the other of harboring the most dangerous, unethical, or immoral ideas. These divides are not just about policy disagreements. They are rooted in the projection of societal shadows. Each side projects its own repressed fears, frustrations, and suppressed desires onto the opposition, casting them as the embodiment of everything that is wrong with the world. This projection prevents meaningful dialogue and understanding, creating an environment where compromise and reconciliation become nearly impossible. The concept of the shadow also plays a significant role in social movements. Activist groups, while often fighting for justice and equality, can also become carriers of the collective shadow of the society they oppose. In some cases, these movements can become so consumed with the idea of righting perceived wrongs that they start to demonize the opposition, refusing to acknowledge the complexities of the situation. The shadow here is not only in the oppressive systems being challenged, but also in the intense emotional reactions that fuel the activism itself. While these movements can undoubtedly create positive social change, they must also be mindful of not becoming the very thing they fight against, a mirror image of the forces they seek to dismantle. Another powerful example of the shadow at work is seen in nationalism and war. Throughout history, nations have projected their fears and insecurities onto other countries, often justifying violent conflicts through the creation of an external enemy. The shadow of a nation, its unresolved fears, unacknowledged desires, and collective trauma can often drive nationalistic fervor and war. During times of crisis, the collective shadow of a country can be brought to the surface as people rally together against an external force they view as a threat to their existence. This projection of fear can lead to xenophobia, racism, and violence as societies attempt to externalize their darker impulses. The rise of consumerism is also a direct manifestation of the shadow in modern society. In many Western cultures, the relentless pursuit of material wealth and superficial success often masks deeper existential concerns. The shadow of consumerism lies in the denial of emptiness, isolation, and a lack of meaning that many people feel beneath the surface of their busy lives. This collective denial has led to widespread dissatisfaction, mental health crises, and environmental destruction. Instead of confronting the emptiness within, society projects its unacknowledged need for fulfillment onto consumer goods, believing that material possessions can solve deeper existential issues. Environmental destruction is another significant reflection of the collective shadow. The disregard for the planet's well-being, the exploitation of natural resources, and the failure to address climate change all point to an unconscious denial of the consequences of our actions. Modern society's obsession with economic growth and short-term pleasure often overshadows the long-term consequences of environmental harm. The shadow here is the denial of our interconnectedness with the planet and the living beings we share it with. This collective shadow manifests in the way we ignore or downplay the effects of our lifestyle on the environment, projecting blame onto others or future generations rather than taking responsibility for the damage we are causing. In order to heal the collective shadow, societies must first confront the aspects of themselves they have been unwilling to acknowledge. This involves facing the uncomfortable truths about the systems, ideologies, and behaviors that perpetuate injustice, inequality, and harm. By becoming more self-aware as a society, we can begin to integrate the collective shadow, acknowledging our flaws and contradictions while striving for a more just, compassionate, and sustainable world. Jung believed that only by confronting and integrating the shadow, both individually and collectively, could we begin to evolve into a more authentic and whole society. In this section, we've seen how the shadow operates on a collective level, influencing everything from political divides to social movements and environmental destruction. The shadow of modern society is deeply embedded in our cultural, political, and economic systems, and confronting it is essential for healing and transformation. By recognizing the societal shadow, we can begin the process of collective self-awareness and move toward a more balanced, integrated, and harmonious world. Now the conclusion, the path to self-mastery. As we reach the end of our exploration into the profound concept of the shadow, we are reminded that the path to self-mastery is not a linear journey, but a dynamic, ongoing process of growth, integration, and transformation. The shadow is not merely an obstacle to overcome, but a critical part of our psyche that, when understood and integrated, can unlock deeper self-awareness, emotional resilience, and a more authentic way of living. Confronting the shadow requires immense courage. It calls us to look into the darkest corners of our being, to acknowledge the traits, fears, and desires we have long denied or suppressed. It forces us to accept that we are not perfect, that we contain within us both light and dark, and that only by embracing both can we truly become whole. Jung's notion of individuation is central to this process, a lifelong journey of integrating the unconscious with the conscious, reconciling our internal contradictions, and achieving balance within ourselves. This path is not without its struggles, but it is through these challenges that we come to know ourselves more deeply and authentically. The shadow is not an enemy to defeat, but a guide, a mirror that reflects the hidden parts of ourselves that are begging for attention. By embracing the shadow, we free ourselves from the unconscious patterns and projections that often dictate our lives, allowing us to respond to the world with greater clarity, compassion, and wisdom. This self-awareness is the first step toward self-mastery, for it is only when we are aware of our shadows that we can transform them into sources of strength. At the societal level, the process of collective shadow work is equally vital. As we recognize the shadow within ourselves, we must also confront the shadows of our cultures and societies, healing the divisions, injustices, and projections that separate us from each other. The transformation of the individual is intertwined with the transformation of the collective. When we heal ourselves, we contribute to the healing of the world around us. The path to self-mastery is not a destination, but a continuous process of growth, awareness, and integration. By confronting our shadow, we take the first step toward a life of authenticity, emotional balance, and deeper understanding. This journey is not easy, but it is the only true path to freedom, inner peace, and mastery of the self.